On 4 is your local election headquarters, and we are taking a live look at the DNC convention in Chicago, where former President Bill Clinton is now speaking. Soon, we'll hear from former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and then later on tonight, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz expected to formally accept the vice presidential nomination.
For more on the night ahead and the night that was last night, UC Berkeley political science professor Steve Fish joins us live. Professor, thanks for your time. It was the Obama's night last night. We'll get to this evening coming up, but I know you've been talking for a long time about how the Democrats need to take the gloves off and not be as nice. Is that what you saw last night?
It sure is. This whole convention, Grant, and indeed this whole last month or so, the Democrats have suddenly taken the gloves off. For the better part of the past decade, they've been really running scared of Trump. And that seems to have changed radically ever since Biden stepped out and Vice President Harris launched her very fast start. They've been ridiculing Trump. They've been really taking it to him. You know, you hear people say recently that Trump's off his game. He's not doing as well. But really, Trump's saying and doing the same things that he's always done. The difference is the Democrats are dealing with him differently. They're dealing with their own campaigns differently. And what we see at this convention is an example of that. This is a lot of celebration. I don't think, for as long as I can remember, I've seen this positive an attitude, this much optimism, this much sense of forward movement and celebratory kind of rhetoric at a convention as we're seeing right now. This is a very new Democratic Party.
You talk about the gloves coming off. The former First Lady, Michelle Obama, last night at one point saying, you know, hope is back. We can feel the hope again. It almost insinuates that hope was getting lost under Biden and him being the candidate. Is that how you took that as well?
Well, Noel, frankly, yes, I did. And I think that was the case. It's remarkable, you know, that when Biden beat Trump in 2000, he saved democracy. You know, another Trump term would have been a major problem for democracy. And President Biden, in many ways, has been a very good president in policy terms, in foreign policy and domestic policy. He's gotten an awful lot done. But what he has not succeeded in doing is kind of remoralizing the party, making people feel great about being Democrats again, really taking it to Trump in a way that made Democrats feel like we were on top. That seems to be something that Vice President Harris is good at, and that's what's made all the difference. It's not policy, it's a matter of approach. It's a matter of approach to campaigning and attitude. And under President Biden, what we've had is good policy making, but not so much of that kind of optimism, not so much of that kind of taking it to the opponent gloves off that we're now getting. And I think that's the turn that really marks this convention and this campaign.
Well, we haven't heard much policy from Harris. She is a brand new candidate. She hasn't done a one-on-one interview or held a press conference. You figure tomorrow night she'll lay out her agenda and her plan to the American people. But you talk about movement candidates, Reagan, Obama in 08, Trump in 16. Do you think that Harris is becoming that right now?
That's a great question, Grant, and I think the answer is yes, she really is. And movement candidates, potentially transformational leaders, don't dwell on particular aspects of policy. They give you their philosophies. You know what kind of policies, generally speaking, they're going to pursue, but they don't just dwell on this or that aspect of policy. This is something that President Biden has done a lot of. But if you want to really shake things up, you have to offer a vision that goes beyond specifics on prescription drug prices or infrastructure spending. Right. You can mention that. But the key to a strong politician is they wrap that in a broader vision of what they want for the country. And that's what Vice President Harris now seems to be doing.
How much should she focus on Trump's wrongdoings tomorrow? Because it seemed like at the RNC, Trump did not really speak about Biden as much as people were expecting him to. Are you expecting to hear Harris talk a lot about Trump?
I think she'll talk about him at least a little bit. The key is that she talk about him in a way that kind of doesn't take him too seriously, frankly, that ridicules him, that doesn't really treat him as the main act. One problem the Democrats have had in recent years is they treat Trump as the main act. They keep shining the spotlight on Trump and acting as if people see enough of this guy, they'll see just how bad he is. But the fact is that if you're constantly ceding the narrative to the other side, even if the other guy is is in some ways really kind of a bad guy, you're still letting him control the news. Trump has been the news for the better part of the last decade. What a strong candidate does is they shine the spotlight on themselves, on their own programs, on what they can bring the country. So what I would anticipate in Vice President Harris's speech tomorrow would be some mention of Trump, but then kind of dismissing him and then focusing on her and her own vision. That's what a strong candidate does, and that's what I would expect from Vice President Harris tomorrow.
I was listening to the Ezra Klein podcast, and they're talking about how the polling shows that Kamala has surged ahead of Trump in, these key battleground states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. But when you really get down to the numbers, it's more like a tie, and the Democrats could be at risk of getting overconfident. Do you see that as a viable concern?
It's possible, but I think Democrats now are not going to be prone to take anything for granted. Let's face it, until just a month ago or so, the Republicans looked like they were bound to win this election. So this good news is fairly new. I don't anticipate the Democrats getting complacent, but that's always a danger. And if they do, they could still, of course, lose this election. Right now, Vice President Harris has the momentum. She'll get more momentum, at least a little bit more from this convention, but they have to stay on the attack. They have to keep doing what they've done in the last month. If they just go back to talking about this or that policy concern, they could still lose this thing. They have to stay on the attack. They have to keep offering this new vision, portraying themselves as this kind of new generational movement, a real political movement, not just a party in search of votes, just as you pointed out earlier, Grant. And if they do that, I think they can win in November, and I think they can win big. And if they actually win, not just by squeaking one out on the Republicans' abortion bans, but if it's clear that their vision was more appealing, and Vice President Harris and Governor Walz win by, say, 4, 5, 6 percentage points, and it's not close in the Electoral College, they could do more than just putting Trump to bed. They could actually deal a blow to Trumpism itself, to this whole threat to democracy that this country has been under ever since Trump won in 2016. That would really be the sign of a new day in American politics, and that now seems to be within reach.
Well, we have several more speakers tonight. We are waiting to hear from Nancy Pelosi this evening. Oprah Winfrey is going to be speaking. Of course, Tim Walz will be speaking tonight as well, and I'm sure they're going to be trying to hit on that same energy that you're speaking about right now. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
My pleasure.